Our next conversation is going to be about seeds and the right of people to have their own seeds, whether that's possible or not. And therefore, that means that if you buy seeds, whose are they? If I buy a car today, is it mine?
Yeah. Ukipata logbook, yes.
So it becomes mine. It's not the manufacturer's car anymore. It is mine, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if I buy seeds from Kenya Seed Company,
right,
whose IP is it? So can I take that seed and that car and start, using the Toyota's engine and start making something that looks like a Land Rover and calling it Land Rover and taking it to the market and so on and so forth? Maybe I'm taking this example too far. But a group of farmers actually took a case to court.
Yes.
And they were talking about, that right to continue holding on to their seeds, particularly indigenous seeds. Case went to court. It was adjudicated and the decision came last year. We discussed it in several of our shows. But now we have our killing, who was very much involved in that case. His name is Wambugu. To talk about
seeds in it,
Mbegu. Wambugu.
Okay.
His name is Wambugu Wanjohi.
Okay. Johi na maanisha nini?
Njohi. Nitei.
Nitei? Aki?
Njohi's
yes. Okay.
Karibu sana wakili.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's a lot that you're going to take us through. There are many people who actually are not aware of that court case.
Yes.
Or even the issues behind, what's it about seeds? But before we get there, Mariam is going to give you the day's quote.
Okay. So today's quote comes from a Senegalese historian who was also a physicist, an anthropologist, a politician, and a chemist. Did many things in one lifetime. His name is Sheikh Anta Diop. And he said something really beautiful, I think that has resonated with quite a number of our guests, that basically, let me get the quote correct, yes. The most powerful cultural weapon in the hands of a people is the knowledge of their own history. The most powerful cultural weapon in the hands of a people is knowledge of their own history. Does it speak to you?
It does. And I think even from everything that we've seen, especially in the country, people who identify with their own individual identities have an edge in terms of psychological awareness, and they know to fight for their spaces. So it's something I resonate with, and it's something that we should all strive to do. At least have something, belong somewhere.
Okay. Set the stage for us. Pre-legislation, how was Kenya's seed market operating?
Okay. Now, Kenya's seed market is, of course, tied to the global seed market. And we have to go back to 1961, where there was the convention called the UPOV, the International Union for Protection of Plant Varieties.
UPOV?
UPOV. Now, UPOV is an international convention that brought about plant breeders' rights. Plant breeders are people who go to the laboratories, come up with our new plant variety, and now the UPOV 1961 was seeking to protect those particular seeds for purposes of exploitation in terms of agriculture and economic benefits. Now, Kenya came into the picture in 1978. There was the original Seed and Plant Varieties Act in 1978. And to align Kenya with UPOV 1961 and later and the later variations or amendments of UPOV. But then again, in 1991, UPOV originally was more commercial, for commercial breeders, until the later amendments, especially in 1978, whereby the drafters of the convention thought that it was proper to have a good balance between farmers' rights and seed sovereignty, as well as intellectual property rights of the plant breeders.
Right.
So, but in 1991, something also significant changed. UPOV 1991, which is the bone of contention of this particular law, the Seed and Plant Varieties Act of 2012, was what became known as the most exploitative, commercially exploitative, the most commercially exploitative international convention when it comes to plant varieties.
Wait, the 1970?
The 1991.
90, okay.
Yes, and we have argued that Kenya had no business aligning itself with UPOV 1991 because 1991 is what gave birth to the Seed and Plant Varieties Act of 2012. Now, Seed and Plant Varieties Act of 2012 is one of the most stringent and one of the most exploitative laws that we have in Kenya. And to give you some context, the Seed and Plant Varieties Act of 2012 prohibits farmers from sharing their seeds, saving their seeds for the next harvests.
Sharing with whom?
Sharing with other farmers. You cannot even save your own seeds for the next harvest because that seed variety has probably some protection. And you see, the history of our people, the African people, we are very generous with our seeds. Actually, we say mbegu hainyimanwi. And people have come up with their own indigenous seeds that they have planted for a very long time. And with these particular seeds, the Seed and Plant Varieties Act of 2012 came up with these regulations that said that your seeds have to be certified first. Okay? Now, the certification process is a very long process. It's very expensive because you need at least 500,000 because it goes through KEFIS, Kenya Plant and Health Inspectorate Service. It has to go through KEFIS. It has to be certified and known to be an original version of a plant variety. And these were...
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
What is original? What does original mean in this context?
Now, when it comes to plant varieties, there are three main categories of for you to register a new plant variety and get protection under intellectual property. It has to be distinct, it has to be uniform, and it has to be stable. You have to show those three things: distinct, uniform, and stable. So that, and of course, how it affects or it grows different from other plant varieties in the market. So that is what a new plant variety is. Now,
so you were going through the restrictions of the Kenya Seed Varieties Now Act.
Yes.
So farmers can't share their seeds. The seeds also need to be certified.
Correct.
Certifying is minimum 500K.
Yes, minimum 500K. And not only that, if caught selling, reselling, or even harvesting your own, saving them for the next harvest, those seeds, inspectors from KEFIS can come into your property and seize those seeds. So this is a very commercially exploitative legislation that we have in Kenya. Yes.
So farmers went to court.
So farmers went to court in the year 2022. A group of 15 farmers, they went to court in 2022 to have these sections of the impugned Seed and Plant Varieties Act declared unconstitutional. So this is a case that has been going on since 2022, and I have had the privilege of being involved in this case. I originally came in as a lawyer representing the Law Society of Kenya. The Law Society of Kenya had some stake because this is a public interest case. And once we came in, we argued with the petitioners. We stood with the petitioners and demonstrated to the court why this legislation was unconstitutional.
Yeah.
And we looked at all these particular sections of the law, from the section that gives inspectors the right to come into your property unannounced and come and seize your seeds. So
Nionyeshe receipt ya hii mbegu.
correct.
In your last season.
Correct.
Madness, okay.
Sasa, those are the things that we had a challenge with. And of course, the argument by the Attorney General was that no one has ever been arrested because of these things. And we were saying that a sword hanging by...
It's just there as a safeguard.
That's what they were saying. And we told them, I actually said this in court, that a sword hanging by a ceiling is no less dangerous because it has not fallen yet. Once it falls, it will injure everyone.
Yeah.
And that is, we are glad that the court finally agreed with us. Said that these sections of the law, the Seed and Plant Varieties Act of 2012 and the Seed and Plant Varieties Regulations of 2016, were unconstitutional. Yes.
You know, we've had this conversation here before, and it was the same. You know, it's a good thing that farmers are challenging
Right.
a piece of legislation and saying this one is basically infringing on our rights.
Yes.
I want to go to UPOV 1991 because 1961, I have not heard you objecting to what UPOV did in 1961. You said 1961 was good. In fact, when Kenya came up with the law in 1978, it was to mirror again in 1991.
Correct.
And came up with this new regulations. What is it in those ones that you have an issue with?
Now, the 1978 version of the UPOV came to, at least had a compromise with the farmers. We have intellectual property rights of the plant breeders, and you have a right as farmers to save your own seeds for your own seed sovereignty, basically.
Yeah.
But then came 1991. We do not know the wisdom or lack thereof that was applied, but they reversed the gains of UPOV. Of course, there are other international treaties that come into play as we progress down this new regime of intellectual property with regards to plant breeders' rights. But 1991, they reversed all those gains from UPOV, and UPOV became the thorn in the flesh. And we know how this works.
So what did they reverse?
No, they reversed...
The part for indigenous?
Not the part for... They made commercially... They made this commercial aspect of the seed... they gave more power. Let me rephrase. They gave more power to plant breeders.
Okay.
At the expense of...
Farmers.
So plant breeders here, we think of them as commercial.
Yes.
Plant
when
breeders.
we say a plant breeder, we think of the Monsantos, the Kenya Seed Company.
The big...
Those big...
So the big companies that have gone into a lot of research into seeing what's happening with the, the society.
Yes.
We have an increased population. What's happening with our ecosystem? We have climate change. And how do we come up with a seed that addresses these ones? Those ones. Those are the bad guys.
Those are the bad guys.
There's the people also that for some, I can bet you 100% it was just a little bit of, not a little bit, probably a lot of lobbying that took place. Because what do you mean suddenly you can't share a seed? You can't use the seed for the next season.
Yes.
It is for commercial interests. And you're right, Eric, it's probably extremely expensive to do the research to figure out, what seed will survive here? What should I mix? It's years of research, and it costs a lot of money that they had to make back. And that commercial interest is probably what fed into 1991 UPOV.
So in that commercial interest, Wakili,
yes,
can we also argue that these plant breeders are actually looking at protecting their intellectual property?
Yes, and we have no problem with that. Actually, it's something that is welcome. However, restricting indigenous seeds that farmers have had for over generations. These are seeds that have been passed down from their grandparents. So restricting such seeds, those are indigenous seeds, and restricting them is actually a violation of the Constitution because they have a right to save their seeds. They have to commercially exploit them.
I hear you.
Yes.
Please tell me how you identify an indigenous seed.
Now, of course, these are issues, of course, that cannot be done by merely looking at them. However, look at it this way.
Eric ukionja kienyeji na nini na
Look
broiler.
at
What's
it.
your difference?
You will know. You will get the difference.
Kuna zingine zinaitwa hybrid.
Broiler.
And there's GMO, of course.
Yeah.
But that is what actually we had also a problem with. Because
What are indigenous seeds?
indigenous seeds are basically seeds that you have had for a very long time. These are seeds. And let me give you some science of what some of our grandmothers did.
Yeah.
Is that when they harvested some seeds, they had to have them adapt to that climate. Of course, so these are seeds that do well in a particular region over the other. Sometimes they even went further and put some of their seeds in their mouth to,
Germinate.
not to germinate,
To coat them with the saliva.
to coat them with saliva for their own DNA so that they grow specifically to their own needs. So these are issues that, yes,
That is so
that is what was happening. And this is something that has happened over time.
Okay.
It has happened time immemorial. Now comes KEFIS. Comes this law that is commercially exploitative and says that, you see those seeds that you are planting,
Certify them.
please have them certified.
Yeah.
This is a farmer in rural Makueni, in rural Nyahururu. How then do you have at least 500,000 to have those seeds certified? And remember, there is also the risk of being arrested. You will be arrested if you continue
certify.
having seeds that are uncertified.
But then, Wakili,
Yes.
isn't it a good thing
Yeah.
if grandmother certifies her seed so that then she's able to even pass it on? You're passing it on to your future generations with a proper certification. This is actually our seed.
Yes.
Part of preserving our culture is that, documenting it and showing that this seed has been tested, has been found to be our seed, indigenous to Teto,
Yes.
and it will grow here and it's come from this family.
Isn't
Isn't it a good thing?
It is a good thing. It is actually a good thing. However, the cost implications.
So, should the argument not be to compel KEFIS to lower the cost?
Kwa 500.
Or to even do it for free? I mean, KEFIS is taxpayer funded, and these are indigenous communities, blah, 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 blah. Facilitate indigenous communities to have their seeds certified.
Yes, I believe that is one way of looking at it. And the judgment was delivered on 27th of November 2025. And we will expect KEFIS to come up with directions or come up with some kind of policy to have those seeds certified in such a manner that is not expensive, that is not stringent. But what did they do? They appealed the decision. So there's an appeal that is currently ongoing. And these are the issues that we are looking at. We are not saying, by the way, intellectual property rights are noble and they have a variety of economic benefits to any IP holder. Music, plant breeders' rights, patents, all these things. These are all important. However, can the government adequately facilitate these particular plant varieties that our parents, our grandparents have been using for them to commercially exploit them? That is something that probably KEFIS should look at.
Let me go into the legal battle itself.
Yes.
When you challenged the act, was it specific sections
Yes.
or the entire thing?
No, it was specific sections.
Okay.
It is not the entire Seed and Plant Varieties Act that was declared unconstitutional. Just the specific aspects that we feel threatened the farmers. For example, that particular section on
sharing?
certification. The fact that they have a right to seize your seeds even without taking you through trial. Okay. And then, of course, there are the stringent penalties. I think it's 200,000, 300,000, sometimes even imprisonment for not less than 6 months.
So, as Kefis are now challenging and appealing this in court, they essentially want to be able to seize your seeds, to be able to not allow sharing, to need certification for indigenous seeds at this cost of 500,000.
Yes.
What is their logic? When you were in court, what were their arguments based off of?
No, their logic is simple, and I do appreciate where they're coming from. Their logic was they are companies that have done a lot of research and development. They are companies that have invested heavily in these particular plant varieties. And their intellectual property rights need to be protected. And it's a fair argument. It's a very fair argument, and I support them for that. However, it should not come at the expense of a farmer who does not even have money to protect their own or have their own varieties of seeds certified. So that is the contention. So there was a very clear conflict between what the IP holder wanted and what the farmers had. And of course, if you look at the long-term implications, is that this decision, it's actually something that is happening all over Africa. These global seed companies come to Africa, lobby in parliament, a law is passed, and this is actually something that has actually even happened previously. I think in Ethiopia they had a seed and version of the Seed and Plant Varieties Act, which now the parliament now enacted another law to have farmers have their own rights. So these are things that are possible. These are things that can be done.
Push and a pull.
Yeah.
What's global best practice?
Now, global best practices, I will go back to Ethiopia. In as much as there is a Seed and Plant Varieties Act or an equivalent of it in Ethiopia, the government also saw the need of protecting these rights of the farmers. And there's no shortage of also laws of international conventions that are
Indigenous people's rights.
Yes, that indigenous people's rights are protected. So it's just the goodwill. Because I didn't expect Kefis to appeal the decision. Actually, amend the act.
Yeah, it also seems like
it's very simple.
low-hanging fruit.
Quickly.
Yes.
Unless there's someone pulling the strings behind Kefis.
Oh, there is a story.
There are many,
Do tell.
There is a story which I will
which you can't tell here.
which I can't tell here, but there was actually a committee that sat down, and when this Seed and Plant Varieties Act was being enacted, there was a previous committees of members of parliament, and some you know them, and of course there was some kind of lobbying by these global seed companies. Yes,
into these things. You know, Mariam, I actually read underhand deals with this case, with the fact that this case went to court. That's why I see the underhand deal.
Okay.
I don't know. You know, people will just be duped. It's my conspiracy theory here.
Okay, let's hear.
Whose benefit does it serve to bring all these issues
To court.
It could be the commercial side, guys.
It could.
Let me walk into that. Okay. Wakili, from your interaction with the farmers and your research, because now you had to research a lot to take this case to court.
Yes.
From what you know, does our KALRO, the Kenya Livestock and Agriculture Livestock Research Organization, have any repository or research on indigenous seeds?
Okay. I think the livestock part is different.
Patana Livestock.
Yes.
Before they became KALRO, they were KARI.
Yes.
Kenya Agriculture Research Institute.
Yes, I do know that there is a repository of seeds, indigenous seeds, that are in the Kenyan market. They are with some NGOs actually have a bank of these indigenous seed varieties.
Yeah.
So there are, I do confirm that there are.
But those are with with the community-based organizations,
Yes, with
right?
community-based
Collectives
organizations.
of communities.
Yes.
Our foremost agricultural researchers
Yes.
and the institution that is mandated to carry out this research,
Yes.
does it have
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't
the
know.
National Museums of Kenya? Is there any official registry
Right.
of our indigenous seeds
Seedlings, yeah.
in Kenya?
We do not know. We
Okay.
do not know.
Has there been any conversation around that? Around, let us actually identify our Kenyan seeds
You see,
and create a repository.
Correct.
Even working with these communities. You guys have seeds. Bring them. Let's test them. Let's look at the DNA. Let's see whether they have guzanaed at any point with somebody else's seed.
correct.
Yeah.
You see,
There's also, just before you
Yes.
answer, there's also this like global repository somewhere in the Arctic
Yes.
Ocean.
Yes.
Are Kenyan seeds deposited there?
yeah.
But then we would have to know what a Kenyan seed is. Aha.
yes. And you see, these are the practical solutions that we need to give KEFIS. These are the practical solutions that our parliament needs to address. But from where I stand, or from the way I look at things, there is a shortage of goodwill from the government, because these are issues that are very practical. Why don't we have a seed repository? Why don't we have, let's see how we conduct public participation? Why don't we do some kind of public participation on how they can bring their seeds to a bank, we certify them, and get value for them. And we can exploit this also commercially. Okay?
Yes.
So those are the issues that we have with our government,
So-
unfortunately.
From also again interacting with the farmers and the various organizations, has there been any form of a petition to recognize officially our seeds?
No, but what I am made now to understand is that they have started the process of public participation to amend the act. Nothing much that
Has happened since
that has happened since, because I think this is very urgent. This is very urgent. I think when you joke with the food security of a country, that is the most important thing that that should be the priority number one. But what we see is just empty talk. This is what we will do. This is what we'll do. Conference here, seminar there, nothing much.
That doesn't happen.
That doesn't happen.
Another angle to this. Whenever we talk about GMOs, one of the things, the greatest fears that people say is shamba yako ikiwa na vitu za GMO, ita infect shamba yangu. I mean, because pollination, wind,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever. So, do we know whether our seeds have not been pollinated by these other
Yeah.
Muzungu imported seeds?
Yeah.
Yeah, you see, and that is why.
Hey, we have a lot. Sorry, I'm just.
Yes.
There's a lot to deal with, and I don't know where Kefis and Kaldro are. But please answer.
Yeah. And which brings me back to what I said at the beginning. There is no way of knowing that a seed, there's no sure way of knowing that a seed is indigenous or not, or whether a seed has, this farmer has violated your IP rights because there are so many factors that are involved. So what...
A bee is a
A
factor.
bee is a factor. Wind. Floods, anything can be a factor. So it is a whole can of worms that needs to be looked at very intricately.
So, now to my conspiracy theory.
Okay.
For as long as we are not talking about identifying and protecting the indigenous seed, having identified it first, and then so knowing this is how we shall plant, this is how we shall grow them, because obviously zikiwa kwa shamba, that's crop pollination will happen. But if there's somewhere else where we are propagating the indigenous seed at a certain nursery in Kari, Kabete, controlled environment, that we know if you want to buy indigenous seed, buy here. This propagator has followed all manner of safeguards to safeguard the seed. Then this conversation is moot.
It's not a void.
And so when we go to court and we are challenging this and we have a conversation, so the conversation will be on, should we inspect, should we not, should we do this, should we not? One day, those guys will come and say, so you tell us then which your
Show
seeds.
us your indigenous seeds.
Show us your seeds.
Yes.
But you see, they took you to court all this time. High Court, Court of Appeal, nini, back and forth. as you're doing that, you are making sure you guys have no way of any telling your seed. I can identify my seed. You bring what you're calling indigenous seed. I will show you a piece of my DNA and I'll tell you this was my seed number 005
Correct.
registered this year.
Correct.
So that's why I'm saying,
You can go
for
mano
me,
a mano.
the conspiracy is actually the other way.
Yeah.
That the people who are with this and taking the case even to court and, jumping, people who would benefit from this things being in court and there being some public awareness around this
Is the other way
are the
around.
commercials.
I hear you. Possible, very
It's
possible.
possible.
But we can go mano a mano if we decide. If you can. Man, I wish it was universal, because yes, if you tell me that this seed has my DNA as a commercial seed producer, I don't know, and then my grandmother's DNA is also in there somewhere. Is there a case for that? Because she. How do we defend ourselves?
It's very intricate. As I said, we need a system that is proven and tested, whereby let farmers, they have their own organizations, their own community-based organizations. Why doesn't KEFIS support them? Plant your seeds, have this repository. We will come and test them for free and give you rights to packaging them and selling them. I think it's a very practical issue that we need to look at.
Right.
Instead of just saying that you cannot outrightly save your seeds for the next harvest. You cannot even share with your neighbor. Those are the issues that we raised, and I'm glad the court found them unconstitutional.
Okay. Kenya Seed Company itself propagates seeds,
Yeah.
also sells them to farmers, distributes them.
Yeah.
Do they require this same?
Are they also bound by the law?
Yes, they are. And I think each and every seed consignment that you buy from them, there is the variety that is on the packaging. You'll know when it was tested, the variety, and I think there is also a certification to it. So they obviously know what is happening, but them now restricting. Actually, you find that most of the cases that were in court that said that this person has been found repackaging and selling seeds are the main complainants are these seed companies. It is always them, and that is why they're having a really difficult time. Probably that is why they also appealed this decision, so that they can be granted some leave or some way to prosecute these cases. And we have maintained that there is no problem with having these global and local seed companies registering their plant breeders' rights. But it shouldn't be at the expense of a farmer who has genuinely saved their seeds for generations. Yes.
Tyrus Getao says, I'm a farmer and I stopped planting certified maize. They are less nutritious and they rely heavily on agri-pesticides and fertilizers. All right, Tyrus, maybe you can give us a bit of how do you know that they are less nutritious?
And the reliance on pesticides and fertilizers is very easy to tell. But then, the nutrition bit.
And then how do you know that the seed that you're planting, certified or not, how do you know the source of the seed that you're planting? Are you saying that now you propagate your own seeds? Maybe you can give us a bit more information, Tyrus, because that's quite interesting as a farmer. But also he says, how would a farmer stop nature, that's bees and wind, from sharing intellectual property through cross-pollination?
Honestly.
See, it's a very genuine
Unless
question.
we geolock bees and the wind. It's like...
And put fences,
So these questions are going to come up over and over again. But let's talk about the case for our own seedlings outside of just intellectual property, like what Tyrus has talked about, from a nutrition perspective, from maybe a climate resistance perspective. Truly, I think what is sold is that essentially when you get GMO seeds, they are more resilient. They have, and the research has been done. We can't deny that. What is there a case for indigenous seeds being more climate resistant, being more nutritious, being more this, being more that? Or is it a blanket truth that essentially the big seed companies and the genetically modified seeds are better?
Yes. There's a quote you shared on...
The most powerful cultural weapon we can have is the knowledge of our own
knowledge.
history.
Yes. And you'll notice that traditional knowledge is making its way back to society. In actual fact, even the African Regional and Intellectual Property Organization has a protocol for protection of traditional knowledge. So this is something that we need to really look at, because at the end of the day, there is no exact science. So he can say, Titus can say that it's more nutritious. And mostly it's because of how culturally or emotionally he's attached to his seeds.
Yeah.
And it's something that we also need to
factor in.
That's
okay.
Yes.
I want something that tastes like home.
Correct.
That's okay.
It is,
And I know how home tastes.
it is perfectly okay. It is perfectly okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now, this conversation will expand and we'll have Kalro and Kefis here, I think, because we have a lot of questions for them as well. But I'm thinking from a public good perspective, this case is now in the appeals process.
Correct.
If the judgment is reversed, right, what do farmers stand to lose? Or will we go back to this kind of situation where the Attorney General's argument was, you know what, no one is really enforcing this. So to Kotuapo, it's an illegality, but no one is really bothering, so it's our.
No, as I said, there's a problem with that. We cannot have something unconstitutional just because it cannot be enforced.
Yeah.
That, I think, is the biggest violation of even the local laws and the constitutional. But let's wait and see. I think since the matter is in court, we cannot... Basically, we cannot litigate it on this platform. However, it will be, we will actually turn back the clock to the gains that we made on the 27th of November 2025 when Justice Rhoda Ruto, sitting in Machakos, sat and said these sections of the Seed and Plant Varieties Act are unconstitutional. So
in that judgment,
yes.
When she found that they are unconstitutional, did she give further orders? Like expecting that this, you're going to correct some remedial measures?
No, there was
just
no...
that this is
there was no structural...
period.
Yes, there was no structural interdict that she preferred. But once an act or a section of the law is declared unconstitutional, it is self-sustaining. It is self-executing. You cannot probably even arrest a farmer and charge them under that section that has been declared unconstitutional. Yes.
Okay. Self-executing.
Yes.
We're wrapping up. Titus amesema the color in the maize is usually an indication of additional nutrition. Interesting.
The darker the color, the more nutritious it is. The darker the berry.
Yes.
As we close, I wanted to know, from a legislative perspective, sitting as our Wakili, member of the Law Society of Kenya, you initially came into this case representing the Law Society of Kenya. Is there anything else we should be doing legislatively to protect indigenous seeds and farmers as a whole?
I
and
think
our food sovereignty, actually.
Yes,
Let me
yes.
broaden that.
First and foremost, public participation. When the Seed and Plant Varieties Act was enacted, I believe probably 2 or 3 committees in Parliament sat down and gave it a go-ahead. But under the new constitution, you ought to conduct public participation. And the kind of public participation that such an act requires or such a law requires is very extensive, because the climatic conditions in Mandera are different from what we find in Kisii. What is in Lamu is different from what you'll find in Nakuru. So we need the government to be quite intentional on these particular issues. Let them invest on research and development. By the way, if I were president, if if I was fortunate enough to be elected as president, I would have a Ministry of Science and Innovation. And because that is where the world is headed, we need to have laws that are geared towards science, research and development, so that we can now exploit them for commercial value. Because if, let's say, we have some climatic conditions, let's say in Nyahururu, that are similar to something in Zambia, we can export our seeds. So Parliament needs to be more intentional. We need to be more clever. Parliament needs to be more practical when it comes to these issues. Yes.
And I mean, it's part of our culture. If we have seeds that have actually survived a certain area, and we can even make that an ecotourism kind of, ecotourism. Go to Makueni, you will find a certain variety of nzo that, this one, the nutritious values, it's because of the soil, it's because of the years, it's because of the climatic conditions here that they are able to do this. If you try to plant this thing anywhere else in the world, it will not grow. And maybe we actually have that.
That is true.
And people can come to Kenya just for that particular purpose, just for that visit, to come and see this only seed that's only available here. But Okili,
yes,
thank you very much for this. And
I'm co-signing Titus
Anasema?
as we close. No, when you were saying the color is the indicator in nutrition, I've just thought about it from an ugali perspective. When you remove the husk and you're just left with the white, you have to fortify that now suddenly.
Correct.
But yakisiagi, your best. So correct.
It is.
Cyrus. Okay. Thanks, Wakili.
The darker the green.
The sweeter the
sweeter the ugali.
Absolutely.
Wambugu Wanjohi is an advocate of the High Court. He was participating, representing the LSK through and through, the Law Society of Kenya, in that particular very, very big case that was in court, taken by farmers. Beautiful cases. Ati farmers went to court to challenge a law. And the court agreed with them. This is the beauty of our constitution. It's lovely. It's lovely.
Very progressive constitution.
Coming up next is Your World with Mwikali and Winnie, understanding hypothermia in babies. When just a cold becomes dangerous and its prevention.
Right.
They have several doctors in the room. Dr. Ann Hansen, who's a founder of Global Newborn Solutions. Dr. Salim Bajaber, who is a pediatrician and child health specialist. And Elizabeth Ngayai, who's a mother with lived experience of caring for a sick newborn.
Hypothermia.
Just cold.
Right. Can be more serious. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Wambugu. And of course, thank you to our fixers. Tupatane kesho 6 to 10 a.m. for another edition of Fixing the Nation. We'll hand you over now, of course, to Mary Mwikali on Your World, and on Vibe Shift, Claudia Naisabwa and Brian Aseli on 96.3 Nation FM.